Hey there, welcome to this week's tutorial. I love this minimalistic name sign vibe. Oh my goodness. Okay, so this one I think could work well for any gender. I know that most of my designs are geared more towards little girls, but I think this will work in any type of nursery. So let's go ahead and start by making the little backing shape. We're going to combine a triangle and a square. So let's start off with the square. Come over to your shapes tool, whatever shape is here, just click and hold until your options come up and select rectangle tool. You can make this whatever size you want. I'm just going to make it small to start with, and then we can resize it when we're finished. So start with a 4" by 4" rectangle. That's fine. And then you can come on up and remove that fill. So right now it has a white fill. You can change it to a black fill. We're just going to do a none fill and just completely take it out. Okay. Then let's go ahead and use a shape tool, and we're going to create the triangle. In Illustrator, that's under the polygon tool, and just click anywhere on the page. You'll want to select 3 sides, but don't worry about the radius because we're going to drag it to where we need it to be. Okay, so it's going to make one that looks like this. Come on over to your panel here and just flip vertically. If you don't have that, it should be under Object Transform, and then you can reflect it vertically. Okay, so that works fine. Use your selection tool to kind of scooch it up until your magenta Smart Guide pops up telling you that it is intersecting with that square. We're going to just zoom in so you can see things a little bit more carefully. Use your direct selection tool, which allows you to select a point instead of the entire thing. Click one of these top corners and then drag it over till it overlaps with the corner of the square. Do the same thing here. And that is beautiful. I know that it looks like it's kind of jutting beyond that, but as long as you kind of let it settle into where it wanted to be, it should be fine. Select both, come to your Pathfinder panel, and click to unite. Look, we have this lovely banner shape. We've done a banner before, but I don't think we've done this shape of a banner. So that's going to be the beginning of our design. Now we're going to go ahead and add 2 little circles for hanging rope. I really love including hanging rope so that customers don't have to wonder how to hang their piece. You know, you can tell them command strips, but I think they really appreciate having it as part of the actual design. So I'm going to do 0.14 by 0.14 ellipses, which makes just, of course, a circle because I used 3mm macrame rope. And that comes out to almost 0.12 inches in diameter. And I like to have just a little bit of breathing room in there. Okay, so I'm just going to put them toward the top. And then another one, I'm right now just kind of eyeballing it. You can use your smart guides if you've got them enabled to make sure that they are aligned with one another, but no worries because you can select, shift and click to select both. Use your align panel to vertically align center, object group them. What that does is it means that when you click either of them, both will be selected and they'll sort of act like one shape. Why is this important? Well, you see how not centered that is, right? Let's start it way over here so you can see it's super not centered. Let's click and drag to select both pieces and use your align panel to horizontal align center, right? Now, if we had done that before we grouped, these 2 circles would have ended up right in the center, and that's no good to us, okay? So that group tool is really helpful. Okay, now that we have that, we're going to do a curved name along the top, a straight name along the bottom, and then we'll kind of place it where we want it to be. Before we get started with the sort of type on a path tool, let's go to View, Show Grid. We're going to use the grid simply because it's helpful to, I'm just kind of moving everything on a grid line because I like it better that way. So we're going to use that grid just because it helps you figure out where to put your curve. So I'll show you what I mean. Let's go ahead and start by using this ellipse tool, clicking anywhere, and doing a 3" by a 3" ellipse. Now we're going to use the type tool, and actually instead we're going to click and hold until our options pop up and use the type on a path tool. Click on that circle. I'm going to use Montaro font, and I think maybe like a size 50 font is a good one. And this one's the Edge version. I want to use the regular. You can use any of these versions. There are some really cool looks here, but since I'm going to be cutting out my font instead of engraving, I think I'll just do regular so that it's nice crisp lines instead of something wavy. Okay, and I'll just write the name. And you have some things to think about here. So I like it like this, but I actually want these letters spaced out a bit more than they are. So I'm going to come over into my properties panel here, and you see this one right here, and it lets you adjust the tracking or kind of how much space you have between the different characters. So you can use the arrow key and just kind of eyeball it if you'd like. I'm just going to put in 50 because I think that that's a nice amount of spacing here. Play around with this, especially if you're using a different font than I'm using. Some fonts are sort of by default set closer to one another and some are further apart. So just play around with this until you like the spacing of your word. Now use the select tool. We're going to move it in here. It doesn't really have to be in its final spot yet. You just want it close at the bottom. Let me just zoom in. You want the bottom edges here close enough to a grid line that you can assess how even things are, because there's not really a great way, as far as I'm aware, to make sure that this is perfectly centered. And right now it's not. So we're going to move that line out of the way. Okay. And we're going to use this line, which you see moves the beginning of the word. Okay. And we're just going to scoot it over, and I'm zoomed in really deeply because it lets you adjust things more finely than when you're zoomed out. Okay, so that does actually matter. And you'll see that the bottom of the N is just beyond that line. The bottom of the S is just beyond that line. And for me, that's close enough. I'm good with that. You are welcome to kind of, actually, I said that and I was lying. I want to just scooch this over a little more. There we go. I like that better. So you're welcome to kind of play around with it until it looks nice to you. And when you are satisfied with it, you're going to treat it just like any other text box. Right click, create outlines. If you happen to do a script font, which I actually don't recommend for a curve here because they don't always play nicely with curves, but if you do, just make sure that you do your Pathfinder Unite. Okay, and ordinarily I would do a second font and pair it with this, but I actually like the just kind of minimalistic look of the same, I don't know why Bleak was popping to mind, that's not right, the same Stark font here. So instead of type on a path, we're going to use regular type and Elliot, but I actually want to make it a little bit smaller because I think that in terms of visual priority, this middle name really looks front and center if it's the same size as this Sebastian. So I'm going to actually bump this down to a size 40 font, and I really think that that looks a bit more, I don't know, visually prioritized. I don't know if that phrasing makes sense to you, but it just means, you know, this looks like the first name now. So right click, create outlines, and you can kind of tuck it up as much as you want. I would not tuck it that far. I wouldn't have it this far apart. So just kind of, I'm not usually a big fan of eyeballing, but in this case, I think that it is a good way to do it. So just kind of play around until you like it. Now, what we're not going to eyeball is the centeredness of it all. So let's select everything, come back over an object, align, horizontal align center. The reason I said object is because if you don't have this panel, it's all under object align, horizontal align center. Now, what I would do at this point is group, or you can just, you know, Pathfinder Unite or object group all of the words, because I like the placement of the words, but I don't like how high up on my banner it is. So I'm going to just scooch it down, not all the way, not centered, just kind of scoot it until it looks right to me. And I'm actually going to make it just a smidge bit bigger. Make sure that if you're resizing that you're holding the shift key down. If you don't, it stretches and that looks abominable. So hold down the shift key so that it resizes proportionally. And then when you have it roughly in the vertical space you want it, go ahead and select all and just realign it. You can't align it too many times, in my opinion. Okay, so I think that this looks really nice, but I actually always recommend turning off your grid because sometimes, or you go to view hide grid, because sometimes the grid lines themselves can kind of mess with the visual weight of stuff. So I'm actually going to scooch it back up a little bit now that I've seen it. Okay, and even though this is technically centered, I think it looks a little off. So I'm just going to scoot it over a little. All right, so if you're making yours out of wood or out of a two-toned acrylic, I think this would look wonderful just engraved. All right, with the words, the letters just engraved. Okay. But if you're making it out of two different materials, let me just show you quickly how I would do that. So I'm going to, well, actually, let's delete that. Let's first size this to, a size we would actually use. This is quite small. This would be nice for maybe a name announcement or something, but it's not something 4 inches wide is quite small. So let's do maybe, I'm actually going to do maybe an 8 inches wide. Let's see what we think about that. I want to make sure I can cut it this way from one sheet of Glowforge size material, and it looks like it's going to work beautifully. So now that it's the size that I want it, I'm going to take my words and just copy paste them over to the side. And these, I'm going to swap the fill and stroke because those will just cut. And I'm actually going to object ungroup this and take Elliot and just nestle it up really close underneath Sebastian because I'm cutting all of my letters out of the same font, out of the same material, and I don't want that big waste of space down there. So I think that's fine. And then here, you just don't want to have to eyeball even straight lines, but especially curves. So I'm going to help you score some placement lines onto your backing so that you don't have to guess about where to put your stuff. So object, path, offset path. We're going to do a negative point. Let's try a negative 0.04 is usually a good one for me. And that looks good. We're going to hit OK. Don't click anywhere yet because we want to, right now we have just that new shape, that little negative offset is selected and not the rest of it. So I'm going to go ahead and change it to the color that I use for scores, which is this green color. And then I'm going to swap my fill and stroke because I want it to be a stroke. Okay, then go to edit, copy, delete it. Click this, delete it. And then go to edit, paste, not paste, but paste in place so that it pastes exactly where it was before. You know that your placement is perfect now. Okay, and this might look a little engravy, but it's actually a stroke. And since it's a different color from my cut line, I can set it to score in the Glowforge user interface. So when we go to cut this, it will cut these circles, it will cut this outer shape, and it will score Sebastian Elliott as long as you remember to set it to score. And then it'll cut all of these letters. I'm going to cut these from a separate material backed with 3M and just peel and stick it down. This is such a lovely sign. I'm really excited about how it's going to turn out. If you make one, I would love to see it. Tag me on Instagram at @thefabletree or send me an email. And if you're interested in learning more about file design, enroll in FileMakers Academy now. It's a 5-week program. I walk you through from the very, very basics of just getting even your Illustrator software all set up properly. And then we start with super simple projects and work our way up to super advanced projects bit by bit. It's not an overwhelming jump. Don't worry. I make sure that you're comfortable with each project before we move on. And by the end of it, you can design anything you need. You won't even need my tutorials anymore. All right. If you have any questions, let me know, and I'll see you next week.